You know Daisy. You know Daisy at all. Yes, friends. On a Friday, it is OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where I'm one of your hosts at Adam Marmbrecht over on Twitter, also covering the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast with my boy, Doug Norrie. Over there is the healthy, wealthy, and wise season generational ticket holder for Big Blue, one Mr. Andrew Makowitz. How are we, sir?
I'm good. I had a little fiasco this morning. That's why we're off to a late start. There was for any dog lovers that listen to the show, dog off a leash, stray dog. You know, as a dog lover myself, you got to figure things out. You gotta rescue that dog and hopefully find the owner. To be continued, Adam. I'm sure at some point I'll give the listeners an update on what happens, but we made sure the dog wasn't running around in the middle of the street.
It's interesting. There's the life of suburbia, I think. And sometimes, listen, you and I are in the same age range. We both have a significant other in our lives. We both have pets. I happen to have a cat. I don't know how that strikes with the audience. I know it's a very divisive animal. But life rolls a little bit differently. You know what I mean? I can't think of the last morning that I was hunting down an elderly woman who is or is not in peril, possibly with two dogs with or trapped underneath her. It's an exciting time in North Jersey.
You know what? It's more exciting to talk about that than what happens about 2 miles away from my place at Giant Stadium, and that is the state of the New York Giants organization, the football team, the play on the field. I could go on and on, Adam.
How about this for an interesting? Because you're right, a lot of things are more exciting, but we're going to get there for you, friends, because that's what it's about here on the podcast. But how about this, just as a juxtaposition, shall we say? The New York Football Giants are a terrible team. That's not the exciting part. But what you might think would be, at least we're going to get to see some really exciting rookies and spark plugs that can do things for us. So we're going to get into some of the injury updates around them. We know who's been able or unable to be on the field, but young talent, right? Meanwhile, over on the Brooklyn Nets, a team that's a title contender and has superstars, they've been running out four rookies over the last two games, pulling off upset victories. It's a rare, as Doug Norrie, credit to him, said on our last episode over there, it's the rare opportunity where you get to both have like all of the superstar talent excitement and then also plucky upstart. Like the Brooklyn Nets, if you're a Giants fan and you want to get the plucky upstart vibes, just go watch the Brooklyn Nets right now. They can give you everything you need as a sports fan with none of the pain and agony that the Giants provide.
Well, you're right about that, and obviously, the COVID issues are presenting opportunities for a lot of these teams in all sports right now.
Yeah.
For unknown guys, undrafted guys, rookie guys to be able to make a name for themselves. What's nice in the NBA is that because it's an 80+ game season, you can afford to like give these guys an opportunity, give them a chance. In the NFL with only a 17 game season, it's like every single game is so critical that if you were to put one of these upstart rookies out there for the Giants, like if everyone wants to see Jake Fromm for the Giants, if they were in a playoff race, even starting him for one game could be the difference between you making the playoffs or not.
Maybe I want to see Gary Brightwell though. How about that? Let's not talk about some scrap heap quarterback that we brought in because what we once thought and maybe no longer is franchise quarterback Daniel Jones is dealing with his neck injury. I don't care about the guy that probably can't throw the ball more than 23 yards down the field. I'm talking about players that could actually matter. But let's not digress too far because there's a lot of things to get to. I'm not saying positive things, just a lot of topics that we're going to cover. COVID is one of them. Obviously, the NFL, and you said all sports are dealing with it right now. A lot of teams are being hit pretty big with it. The New York Football Giants had a number of guys added to that list for players that will not be eligible, in addition to all of the injuries and other players that were already potentially in the protocols prior to the last couple of days. Added to that list so you already had Rodarius Williams, Darnay Holmes, Nate Ebner, Quincy Wilson. We're all on injured reserve coming into this weekend. And then you'll add Adoree Jackson and Aaron Robinson, who will not be able to play this weekend due to the COVID-19 protocol. So Um, Listen, the Giants play the Cowboys. If you're not aware, and we'll dance in and out there. Ultimately, we will finish the show as we always do with the line and with our picks. But this is the state of the NFL, and I think unlike some other sports you mentioned, NBA, it's 8 players minimum to be able to get your team out there and make it happen. It's a little bit different at the NFL level because you do have more players, and the NFL is the kind of machine that basically says like we're not terribly concerned if you have if you have your starting quarterback, your starting secondary, whatever the case may be. But the Giants are going through it. They were able to avoid it for the most part this season in any big bulk. But as a lot of teams now, you're getting a couple of big hits, and it's going to change what you see on the field, but we're just not in a place, I don't think, from a sports standpoint, where you can afford to start to do what they had done last year, shuffling schedules and making adjustments, right? At some point, you just have to say, it is what it is. We have to keep getting through this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge right now, Adam. I don't necessarily know what's gonna happen here. Like it's gonna be a tough situation for everyone involved. It's difficult because, like you said, there doesn't seem to be a pause anytime coming. Even though you look at teams like the Washington football team that have 21 people on the COVID list right now from their roster. You look at the Cleveland Browns, who Baker Mayfield tested positive, Case Keenum tested positive. They're now down to their third string, Nick Mullins, and they're in a dogfight to be, pun intended, to be able to make the playoffs. It's like there are huge implications and ramifications for teams that are fighting for a playoff spot. The Giants aren't one of them, but man, oh man, I mean, we'll get into it in a second in terms of the matchup. But think about it: no Aaron Robinson, no Adoree Jackson, Darnay Holmes is on IR, and you have arguably like the best 3-headed wide receiver monster in the league coming in Gallup, Lamb, and Cooper. Like that is going to be a tall order for the Giants to be able to contain them.
I can't imagine it'll be a problem. I'm sure they'll just sort itself out. The interesting thing, before I get to, I want to look back a little bit here because there was some other news that came out over this past week. But do you start to look at it? This has kind of been the sentiment, or at least the conversation that's been going on. Do you look at it now as we have to, or sports team, like you're saying we, but that sports teams and sports leagues have to just start to look at, and maybe fans should start to look at COVID protocols, losing players sometimes as these are injuries. You have to mentally associate them as being injuries because leagues don't stop for injuries. Even when you lose a starting player, you go, man, that really stinks. Twisted his ankle, whatever the case may be, not going to happen for a few games. And yet you got to go on to the next guy. Obviously, injuries don't happen in bulk like this, like they have for some teams. But do you think we just need to kind of shift our mentality because you cannot make the adjustments. You cannot fix this problem in any way, shape, or form, shy of saying, for the NFL purposes, it's a 100-man roster, right? And just and flood your team with players. I just don't think that that's possible. So we have to kind of just say, yeah, this is another thing that happens. It's a part of the game. And let's see how it plays itself out. And if you're a playoff team, obviously it can certainly be a significant issue, but it was brought up on the NBA side of it. Go back to the Western Conference playoffs last year. You didn't have Chris Paul for the Suns. He missed a series for the Suns because of COVID protocols. It is what it is at a certain point.
Well, if you're the NFL, it's pretty simple. Like the NFL isn't successful because of one player. It's because everybody wants to watch it. The NFL is like pizza. It doesn't matter where you are or like how good it is. You're going to eat the pizza regardless. And so the NFL is saying, we cannot stop these games from being played. We don't care if you have to watch Nick Mullins versus versus Marcus Mariota in prime time because you're going to watch it. You will. Like, it doesn't matter who's on the field. Now, the nice thing, Adam, is I feel like, as a Giants fan who's struggling with how terrible the team has been, let's just start throwing the COVID excuses around as like the reason why the team hasn't been successful, right?
By the way,
I mean, how are we supposed to beat the Cowboys without Aaron Robinson and Adoree Jackson? Like, if we would have had them, obviously the game would have been, decisively in the Giants' favor, right?
Well, by the way, this is exactly right. Like, because the season is long, and then by the time you get to the end of it, everything, whether it's injuries, personnel, all this stuff, it all gets lumped into a big bag of what happened that year. And there is this world. If you're a Joe Judge fan, or if reports have come out that John Mara is incredibly high on Joe Judge, that he believes that he is a Belichick, a Bill Parcells. So, and maybe some of the things around him have been the circumstances, etc. But you're going to get to the end of this year and go, oh, well, remember, we had COVID and we had this and we had that. And if you actually sat down and looked at the timelines and watched the record, you go, not really an excuse that you can use, but it's easy to do it as you get 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month out from the season. And I wonder if fans and if the Giants organization will start to talk about it that way.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because when you just kind of condense the season into a couple of talking points, you're like, well, what were the Giants supposed to do? Daniel Jones had a neck issue for a few weeks. Saquon Barkley wasn't fully healthy. The prized free agent signing Kenny Golladay missed a bunch of games. The team just couldn't be healthy. Like, how are we ever supposed to know that this thing didn't work? Because we never saw it on the field. But Adam, the reality is there were decisions that were made before the first snap ever took place this season that led to this, and we all should have saw it coming.
Boy, howdy, Werther. What an incredible segue from Andrew Makowitz. He's not co-host and equal party co-host on this podcast for nothing. In the offseason, we talked about it. We talked about Kenny Golladay and that signing and what it meant from a financial commitment standpoint relative to where else money could have been spent. But one of the other big spots, one of the talking points, as we say, is, oh, well, you couldn't have known that Nick Gates was going to get injured and that was going to impact the offensive line, right? But you should have had some sense about what Matt Pert was going to be or not be. You knew what Nate Solder was going to be, and you also knew what Will Hernandez was going to be. And yet, in spite of all of that, in the offseason, when the Giants went to one Kevin Zeitler and said, hey, we want to restructure, Zeitler said, no, thank you. So the Giants moved off of him, paid the price tag of $2.5 million to effectively not have to pay the remainder, which totals $12 million, right? So you save $12 million. I put it in quotes because you were paying a good player to play good football for you. So I don't know if it's saving anything when you give that up. And the problem here is, and you'll give the exact stats on how effective he's been this year, making $22 million elsewhere in the league. But you went out and you signed a guy like Zach Fulton for I think around $2 million, maybe a little bit less. Then you go out and you keep Will Hernandez. And if you want to talk about dead cap money, could have moved off of him and saved yourself about $2 million by paying $800,000 worth of penalties for moving off of him, a guy that you're going to move off of when this year is over, by the way. All of these numbers, and then you can even get into some other players around, who you brought into the team. A guy like Ryan Anderson may have forgotten that he was a Giant at one point because that was pretty short-lived. Lump that money together, you're already up to $4-5 million-ish. The point is that, the finances were there to make that happen. And not only that, the idea that, hey, that's a big cap hit that you have for Zeitler. We've already heard that they're talking about how do we extend James Bradbury in the offseason to spread his money out. You've already heard about all the signings in the offseason and whether or not they were the best decision that the Giants could have made with their money. This is a player who is playing incredibly strong football at a position that the Giants have a glaring need. It is the definition of ineptitude could not be staring you more directly in your face when you talk about Dave Gettleman and the way that they make decisions in this organization, given what you clearly knew you needed, what you clearly knew you had, and then somehow, inexplicably, gun, foot, shoot.
Adam, I'm going to start this whole soliloquy off with a quote. And this is the quote. First of all, you don't want it to be good to be good enough. You just want it to be good, plain and simple. It's really apparent that we have a little more confidence in our offensive linemen than you guys do. So I'm just going to say we're happy with the group that we have. Do you know who said that?
It's one David Gettleman.
That is Dave Gettleman after releasing Kevin Zeitler and not drafting an offensive lineman in the offseason. So, the writing was on the wall when he looked around. He's like, you guys think you're smarter than me? You think you're smarter than me? I'm here every day. I see these guys, and guess what? They're better than you think, so I'm going to leave it at this. I am confident in what we've got, and guess what? It has looked horrific, and he should be Giant fans should be shoveling those words back in his mouth because it's looked terrible on the field. So I'll start with that.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I know, like, it's like, oh well, the injuries, it's fine, but like again, like I'll talk about just about Will Hernandez, like that's it. It's just about Will Hernandez, and then you bring in Zach Fulton, by the way, who isn't a part of the rotation anymore, and several other players have come in to replace him because he was terrible when you brought him in anyway. But that's it. You had a very clear choice, a very clear opportunity to say we had found a solid offensive lineman, nay, even better than solid, and we chose to move on from it. It's amazing. And by the way, you and I, we went through these paces at the time of the draft, going, well, okay, like you moved off of Zeitler, so that and the Gettleman made his big proclamation. And you thought, all right, maybe they really do like the way these things look, and we believe that Matt Peart's going to be starting at right tackle for you. And should we be going for Slater at the top of the draft? Now we're going to trade back. We're going to do these things. You go along with the narrative because you try to find the logic in it. And it's not an excuse for us. This is for everybody. It's kind of easy to get swept up in a really bad narrative, because if you don't, to examine it, it's almost impossible to find what reasonable decision making could be going on to bring you to this place.
So, all right, let me break it down with some stats, because I know our listeners love some stats, and this is why we're so frustrated with what's going on. So, NFL on CBS posted a tweet out that talked about Kevin Zeitler, the guy that we released. Kevin Zeitler has been a brick wall this season, is what it says. 558 pass blocking snaps, 0 sacks allowed, 0 hits allowed. No other player in the NFL with 250 pass blocking snaps has allowed 0 in both of those categories. Yeah. So, like, no one that has played half the amount of snaps that Zeitler has had his type of production. It's incredible. And, people may say, oh, we're just focusing on one guy, one situation. During the draft, and I know that you were fine with it when we were talking about it, I wanted Rashawn Slater at the pick that we ended up trading out of. And guess what? We think Andrew Thomas has been good at roughly a 75 Pro Football Focus. Rashawn Slater is at an 80 Pro Football Focus. He is already playing at a Pro Bowl left tackle level. And like this is the ineptitude that we talk about, is we release our best offensive lineman, right? From the previous season. We don't address it in the offseason in the draft. And then we have our GM like kind of spitting in our faces, telling us that we don't know what we're talking about. We're not football people. And then we see the product on the field and it's absolutely terrible. And like, then you think about how, we go out and spend $18-19 million on Kenny Golladay. We end up spending another first round draft pick on a wide receiver. So we double down on the wide receiving front. And like, if you asked any Giant fan right now, would you trade Kenny Golladay and his $18 million contract for Kevin Zeitler making $7 million a year? You'd save $11 million and you'd have a guard that hasn't given up a sack or a hit yet. Like, how many Giant fans would be like, how many draft picks would we have to attach to that to make it happen? And instead, we were the ones that did it. We were the ones, like, Dave Gettleman made that choice in the offseason. And like, if we could reverse it, we would have to give up draft capital to reverse that mistake.
Oh, of course. And this is, again, you go back and you think about it. It's a domino effect, right? Because you sit here and you say, now, remember, we traded back. We're going to have multiple first round picks. We know that both the picks, along with Chicago's, are going to be in the top 10 this year, etc. But you go back and you say, okay, listen, I can be excited about having the multiple picks in multiple rounds. That is a good thing. But it's the decision-making process of, so what would you have preferred? Would you have preferred to stay where you were and gotten Slater? And by the way, let's paint a total picture for you. Stay where you were. Don't trade back. Don't get the extra pick in the following draft, and go ahead and get yourself Rashawn Slater. And by the way, don't sign Kenny Golladay in the offseason and just keep Kevin Zeitler. And then probably maybe look at one of like the, slightly lower tier wide receivers that was out there on the market. Maybe a younger guy, not as proven, maybe a guy that's been known to be very healthy. Look out across the landscape there. But you could have come into this year and saying Slater's going to be, say, the starting right tackle for your team, and Matt Peart's going to be the backup swing, and you could effectively release Nate Solder, as good of a human being as he has been. And you would have had an offensive line that included Andrew Thomas, that included Rashawn Slater, and that included Kevin Zeitler. You would have put 3/5 of a line out there. And by the way, by NFL standards, that's the goal If you have 3 out of 5 that you feel really good about, the other 2 spots you can massage to success. And then if you look inside that draft, whatever you want to end up doing, you can still get Azeez Ojulari in the second round. Maybe it's a wide receiver in the third round, etc. Like, it doesn't have to be just that one path. You also could have traded back and still addressed more important issues than the player that we think is a spark plug and could be really impressive in Kadarius Toney. Maybe you don't go that way. Or maybe you do trade back and you don't get Rashawn Slater, but you didn't bother signing Kenny Golladay, and that's what affords you to take Toney and have it make sense. Like, it's just the spider web of decision making, that decision making tree, right? It's like Dave Gettleman somehow managed to navigate the exact one path through all of it, where
Right.
when you finally came out the other side, you go, well, what a effing disaster. Like, all you can do is look back and be like, wow, it's almost impressive. You could have accidentally fell into a better decision-making route, and you still got there. You still got to the worst possible version of this. And to temper it, I will say, when you do come out with all the multiple picks and multiple rounds, it's not the worst version of it, but it's in the bottom 10.
But
and by the way, because picks don't actually mean anything yet, they only mean something once you draft the player or whatever you do with them. So those are that's shiny candy, shiny toys up on the shelves, but you don't know if you take them down and play with them and they're fantastic, or they fall into pieces in your hands.
Well, look at trusting the process in the NBA with the 76ers, where they're like, don't worry, we got a bunch of picks. It's going to be amazing when we get this whole complement of players together. It's going to be awesome. And like that, you sell the fan base on hope. It's what the Oklahoma City Thunder are doing in the NBA, where, Sam Presti has accumulated like 27 picks over the next 4 or 5 drafts. Like, he's selling everybody on hope. And that's what the Giants are saying. Oh, a couple injuries. We got another first round pick next year. Honestly, if you asked any Giant fan, would you trade a first round pick for Rashawn Slater right now? You would do it in a heartbeat. No questions asked. And guess what? Like, that's why you should have drafted him in the first place. I don't want to beat a dead horse on this. Everyone is frustrated, but also we passed on guys like Micah Parsons, who just happens to be across the field from us on this game coming Sunday. 12 sacks. He's clearly going to win Defensive Player of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year. He's in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. Like you said, we just picked, like, we got Toney. We still don't know what we're getting from him. We have this extra first round pick. It's a big question mark for the Giants right now, but any of the other guys that were picked in that area seem to be doing pretty good so far in their NFL debuts.
So that's the deal. The Giants suck. I guess is generally, that's just, we wanted to make sure that we came in first. We fill your hearts with warm vibes by telling you there's a lost woman and or several dogs in the community. We double down by letting you know the Giants have made terrible decisions throughout the season, nay, the prior off season. Silver lining, Dave Gettleman's not going to be here next year. I mean, that clearly can't happen. Can it? Can it? It's almost like I'm asking a question, John Mara. Can it still happen? Because I wouldn't hate it if you told me that it definitely wasn't going to happen. But that being the case, the Giants will take on the Dallas Cowboys this weekend in what is a critical game for the trajectory of their season. We could talk a little bit about the players, the matchups. I mean, listen, we said injuries that the Giants are dealing with on all sides of the ball. Depleted across the board. You don't have your starting quarterback. You don't have, you're still not going to have Toney. You're going to have a couple of your wide receivers. Shepard will be out there. You're going to have, as you fingers crossed hope, Pro Bowl Evan Ingram out there as well. But it's going to be a difficult game. This is just going to be the kind of game that I think we maybe not even death by 1,000 paper cuts. We said that before about a team that is outmatched. This more feels like maybe death by 3 swift punches to the face and then just kind of getting some dirt kicked on you over the course.
Yeah, well, it's tough for a few reasons. One is while the Cowboys' rushing attack is a little bit banged up with Pollard having foot issues, Ezekiel Elliott not looking as good as he has been. The running attack, rushing attack hasn't been great. However, you look at that passing attack, and since Dak Prescott has come back from his injury, he has looked a little banged up. But when you talk about CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Michael Gallup being out there, look across the field with Darnay Holmes on IR, with Aaron Robinson going into the COVID list, with Rodarius Williams on IR, with Ardori Jackson on the COVID list, when you talk about the cornerback room, you're talking about James Bradbury. You're talking about Julian Love, who's a safety that's going to have to fill in nickel packages. And you're talking about special teamer Keon Crossan. Those are the three cornerbacks or people that can play the cornerback position that the Giants have active.
Should
That
be
is
fine.
not a recipe for success. This, like, we can talk about how beat up the team is and how COVID, but regardless, this team is going to have to put something out on the field, and that is not going to be able to handle those weapons. And when you talk about, well, maybe the Giants can get in a shootout and they can score some points. What has the Giant offense done almost this entire season that gives you any confidence that if this game is in the high 20s to early 30s, that the Giants have any opportunity to win the game?
No. Listen, I mean, this is and funnily enough, the one piece, all things being equal, I said this the last 2 weeks. Saquon Barkley, this is your opportunity to, show your value and try to carry a team to victory. And I'm not saying that that's even an easy task, no matter what your talent level is at the position, but he hasn't been Saquon Barkley. He hasn't been a top running back, right? So like even some of these guys you look to, you go, can I really expect Saquon Barkley to run wild on the Dallas Cowboys? Like, no, I can't. And then inside the wide receiving room, you say, even if I love Sterling Shepard, which I do, Mike Glennon has only gone the wrong way over the last couple of weeks. Being a serviceable backup is one thing, but he seemingly has just come in and become a shell of himself. I can't guarantee that the ball is going to get to any of these guys either. So it's just, all of the ineptitude we talk about coming into the season or decisions that were made. Now it is just about, there's not a lot of talent available out there on the field for you. The Dallas Cowboys, it feels like to me, are going to come into this game. And it's interesting, with all the weapons that they do have and as dangerous as they can be, they may just start though and say, like, are you going to be able to stop Ezekiel Elliott? If you can do that, then we'll move on to phase 2 of using all these weapons. Because if you're the Dallas Cowboys, you just as much as anything want to navigate this game, stay healthy, right? Not overtax anybody, and try to get out of this thing somewhat quickly. So it's interesting to see how Dallas will approach it. And I think the way that they start the game will tell you what level of concern they feel about the Giants and a potential, look past game, right? A speed bump on the schedule. Didn't really pay attention to them. You'll know that pretty quick with how these teams execute on both sides.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with the health of Leonard Williams. He came out of the game last week with an elbow injury. They feared it was going to be a season ender. The reports came back that it actually wasn't as bad as anyone thought. He was a limited participant in practice. Obviously, having the big cat on the field is huge to be able to stop the run, to give this Giant defense any kind of semblance of teeth to be able to stop this potent Cowboys offense. But
Yep.
Adam, I mean, the problem that we're going to have is that the Cowboys average over 2 takeaways a game. They're second in the league at 2.1 takeaways a game. A lot of that is Trayvon Diggs, but a lot of that is Micah Parsons and Randy Gregory and DeMarcus Lawrence being able to get pressure on the quarterback, make them make mistakes, turnovers, fumbles, interceptions, with a porous offensive line, with a backup quarterback in Mike Glennon, with a half healthy Saquon Barkley out there, with Kenny Golladay kind of dipping his toe into being a Giant so far. Like, I just don't even see how this offense is going to manufacture 14 points, let alone not give up 2 turnovers in the game.
No, you look at this game last week against the Chargers, Giants put window dressing on it. And I think we're all pretty disgusted with the way Joe Judge tried to treat late scores as being, hey, we hung in there and fought. You were losing 37-7, buddy. Like that was the score line. It was not 37-21. And if you think about it from that standpoint, you walk into this game, we're in the dark times of this NFL season for the New York Football Giants, where you could be taught this could be 24-0 in the first half. It could be, this could be a 40-point game for Dallas. You think back to that game again the week prior. The defense has done this all season long, by the way. They've been fighting, right? They've tried to keep you in games for as long as you can. And it's funny to say they gave 37 points. The defense sucks. Like, they did everything they could for as long as they could. But when your offense just cannot move the ball at all, when you're constantly on the field, and we've said this theme over the past couple of seasons as well, it's just the exhaustion kicks in. You double down with a limited Leonard Williams, and it's going to be a hard task. I don't know, man. Let's get into the line here, where it is, what we think Vegas is talking about for this one, and really where our picks end up, because again, you can look at the score and say the Giants broke 20 points, beat their average for the year, and you go, not real points, buddy. Real points, seven real points, and the week before was 9 real points, right? So this is an offense that is not able to score at all, and it really it makes a recipe for a really rough day.
Yeah, I mean the Vegas lines on this game have the Giants at home getting 10.5 points and the over under at 44.5. And
How often, sorry, quickly, how often do you think that the spread of a game, that the points that a team is getting could actually be more points than they'll score? Think about that.
Oh, interesting. Well, it's probably happens quite a bit, and that's when you see those 17-point spreads back when like Brady was in New England and you thought they were going to blow people out, or when Mahomes was peak Mahomes.
Sure.
But yeah, it's not looking good. I mean, the Giants are 2-score underdogs at home in a division game. In December, not a good situation to be in by any means. I I don't know what there is to really say. What I think is interesting is the spread started out at an 11.5 and has come down to 10.5. So people are inexplicably betting the Giants. Like the majority of wagers are going in on the Cowboys right now, but the line keeps coming down, which means the wise guys in Vegas are the ones putting large bets saying 11.5 points is too many points for the Giants to be getting. I, I don't know. Like, what does that tell you, Adam?
Well, see, the only thing that I can think is to the idea of game script, and that maybe that the Cowboys aren't going to lather this thing on early and often, and it could end up being, again, go back to last week, right? A late score, so 37-21. What could have been a 30-point spread became just a 16-point spread, right? So if you maybe follow that logic, you'd say this game could be 30-10, and a field goal from the Giants late or something ends up making it a 30-13 game, or whatever it is. Maybe it moves that line and you get back within the spread. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how you can get to a place where, because I just did that. I think we just did last week, right? We were like, I just redid that math there. I just gave the Giants 10 points, and you're like, yeah, and you still lose by 10. Like, it's like, paint me a scenario where it makes sense that the Giants will be close enough that 10.5 points, you're going to lose 20-30, 30-20, right? And you want to be reasonable and say that the Cowboys slow play this game, 21 points for the Cowboys, maybe 21-10, right? Like maybe 21 to, that's the only way you can get to a place where this margin starts to make a little bit of sense. But to say the Cowboys are only going to score 21 points against the Giants, I just can't see it. Like, at best, if you said 27 points for the Cowboys, then you still got to make it to 17 if you're the Giants. Like, it's just I can't find the logic in it.
That's for the spread, and that's just the spread that you're talking about. You're not even talking
right
about the Giants winning the game. Like, you're like, if the Cowboys get to 27, the Giants need to get to their average of 17.5, 18 points a game, which, like,
right.
with a backup quarterback and all these injuries, I don't know. Adam, before we give a prediction, I have a quick question for you. I don't want to derail the show. We're doing really well today, trying to keep it super positive. But do you want the Giants to win this game?
Let's keep it super positive. Well, listen, I've always said I don't go into any Giants game wanting them to lose. They have 2 picks in the top 10. We know the Bears are having a bad season as well. And we're going to play them. I don't go in wanting my team to lose. So if all of a sudden the Giants come out and they spark plug that they are, they figure something out, or Saquon goes off, whatever it may be, Jake Fromm lights it up coming in off the bench in replacement of Mike Glennon, fantastic. But I'm not going to be disgusted or disappointed in the loss the way that I almost always am. I very rarely get to a point, if ever, in a Giants season where I don't care. They could have one win, and I want them to win the last game of the season. I said it a handful of years ago when it was, you cost yourself Chase Young. I said I didn't care. It's about getting better as a team, getting better as an organization. The difference now is we're sitting here talking about having a new GM, having maybe a new quarterback, maybe having a new head coach, right? Like, we're talking about wanting them to rebuild. And the most important piece to that is having draft capital and assets. So I do look at it and say, what are wins achieving for this team this year? It's not building towards something going forward. It's really just Joe Judge trying to justify that he should still be the coach, or Dave Gettleman saying I made good moves. There's still quality here, or the fan base, whatever. So no, man, I think the worst thing you can say is that I'm apathetic to what the Giants do on a week to week basis, because I know this isn't it. This is not it. It's going to be something different before things get better in New York.
Yeah, I feel very similar. Yeah, well, I mean, the issue for me, Adam, is more that I just don't like losing to the Cowboys, and so like while draft picks are important and assets are important, I just can't bring myself to want the Giants to lose to Dallas. So I really, really want them to win this game.
100%. I want the win,
and I get it. It's like, the faster we get down to the floor, the easier it is to bring it up to the ceiling. So like, you want to get the best draft pick. You want to ensure that Dave Gettleman's out. You want to get, be able to do all this different stuff. I just wish the Giants could pull this victory out so I don't have to think about the Cowboys potentially making a run in the playoffs. With that said, we're going to get into quick prediction time. We talked about it before. Backup quarterback, half the team is hurt. We have no cornerbacks. Leonard Williams may or may not play. Saquon Barkley looks like just another running back right now. Mike Glennon, again, against the team that averages over 2 turnovers a game, it just doesn't feel like anywhere that I see the Giants keeping this one close. And it feels very much like the Chargers game, to be honest with you. Like, I think I said 31-10 in that one. I think this one's probably relatively close. I think it's going to be 28-10 in this one, because I just don't see the Giants manufacturing points. And I would have been pretty close on my pick if we didn't have a garbage time touchdown last week. I think it's going to be more of the same. I think the Giants would be lucky to score 2 touchdowns in this game, Adam.
As you know, friends, I'm committed to the New York Football Giants every single week.
So I want to see this. I want to see the gymnastics that you can pull here. Give me the game script where the Giants pull this one out, and you shoo away the 10.5 points, and they just win this outright. Give it to us, Adam.
Yeah, Jack Reacher, never back down. Listen, Dak Prescott has been struggling, right? He's not the same player. And I'll be honest with you, not having Pollard at 100% health, that matters, because Ezekiel Elliott is not the same running back he once was. You can make the case that Pollard might be even more important to what they've done on a game-to-game, week-to-week basis. So you're missing a couple of key pieces. Defensive front, little dinged up for them as well. Gives Glennon some time, even if it's just handing the ball off. I'm going to say that Saquon Barkley is going to give you a little something this week. He's going to be a little bit of a spark plug there. Who knows? Maybe we can get a little Gary Brightwell. I'm not sure. But you move the ball effectively. You get Sterling Shepard back. You use some of those short passes to set up maybe a couple of big opportunities. That Kenny Galladay, Evan Ingram comes through a little bit down the field. And I'm going to say that the defense does a little bit of work back up against the wall, depleted secondary. It's just the opportunity that they need to come out with just a little bit of venom in their mouths. Leonard Williams injured? No. He gets pressure. Sexy Dexy gets pressure. They do some things. They keep it low scoring and maybe force a turnover on Dallas. And if the Giants can play a clean game, no turnovers for Glennon, no fumbles, well, my friends, that's how you get yourself to a 17-16 victory. Field goals across the board for the Dallas Cowboys. You can just smell it. You can smell the low-scoring affair. Giants win outright. 1-point victory, division battle.
Wow. I mean, you're telling the listeners plus 300, plus 350 for the Giants currently on some of the betting sites. You're saying 3-1 odds on your money, almost 3.5-1. Go out there and get it. You have the Adam guarantee. You can email the show if the bet doesn't hit and you want a full refund. I think Adam is going to be sponsoring that because he's that confident in the Giants pulling the upset off. So
triple stamp it, no erases, guys. Listen. You can do whatever you want with the way my voice sounds when I say what I think is going to happen in the game. That's up to you, fans. What I will say at the end of the day is that the hardest part about these games is I do watch the Giants players. This is a silly thing, but they haven't turned, right? That thing of turning on the coach, turning on each other. You haven't heard anything out of the locker room. So you do see when the Giants have been able to win games, you see how excited and satisfied these players are. So from that standpoint, I do hope that the Giants win, because for all of the dysfunction of this team, the players have been working their butts off. Just because you're a really bad offensive lineman doesn't mean that Will Hernandez isn't trying. He's giving it all he's got. Just because the secondary has one starter, it doesn't mean that they're not giving it everything they've got. So, listen, I hope that the Giants put out a performance that fans can be proud of. live with the results. We know where we're headed in the big picture. This has been a rough year, and God, I hate the Cowboys.
Giants 2021 motto, according to Adam, is, "Hey, at least we tried."
Giants 2021 motto was looking ahead to 2022. We'll be back again talking New York football. Giants will recap the game from Sunday at the beginning of next week. Obviously, you can follow us on social media. You can like, subscribe, get us over on YouTube as well if that's your deal. And until next time, as he will demand that the people know, in spite of it all,
Quick update, Adam. The
Oh.
dog has been reunited with his owner. We end on a positive note. The dog has gotten back to his rightful home. It's good signs for the Giants. As always, let's go Big Blue.
We did it! We did it! Ring the bells! Fluffy's home!